Why do women come back after rejecting you? The answer isn't what you've been told by society, your friends, or the countless dating gurus whispering half-truths in your ear. It's not because she suddenly realized you were the one, or because she missed your warmth in the quiet hours of the night. No, the truth is deeper and far less romantic. She never truly wanted to let you go. What she wanted was control. But when you didn't chase, when you didn't fall apart, something in her shifted. She didn't expect your silence to be that loud. She didn't expect your absence to carry that kind of weight. And she certainly didn't expect to witness your rise from a distance. You see, women often return not out of love, but out of discomfort. The discomfort of watching a man become whole without them. They're drawn to the man who no longer needs to explain himself, who no longer hopes for her validation, who builds, rises and detaches, not with anger, but with peace. This world will tell you to be nicer, to wait, to prove your worth. But here at Stoic Station, we believe something else. Your worth is not proven by how long you hold on. It's revealed in how powerfully you let go. So before we begin, drop a 1 in the comments if you've ever held on too long. Drop a 2 if you're finally learning to let go. And if this message already speaks to something quiet inside you, like the video and subscribe to Stoic Station, where we cut through the noise and speak to the soul of the modern man. Now stay with me till the end, because we're about to uncover not just why she comes back, but how to make sure this time it's on your terms. Let's begin. Reason number 1. She rejected you, but you released her. Most men, when they're rejected, grip harder, not because they don't see the truth, but because they can't yet accept it. They send that one last message, hoping it'll change her mind. They over-explain, thinking maybe if she just understood what they meant, she'd reconsider. It's not love that drives them in that moment. It's fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of not being enough. Fear that if they stop reaching out, they'll disappear entirely from her mind. But you didn't follow that path. You didn't cling. You didn't chase. You didn't try to out-talk her silence. You did the rarest thing a man can do. You released her. Not to punish her, not to prove a point. You let go for one reason only, because your peace mattered more than her presence. That's not detachment born from bitterness. That's clarity born from truth. You saw the rejection not as a verdict on your worth, but as a redirection of your energy. You didn't vanish so she would notice. You disappeared because the man you were becoming no longer waited for someone else to confirm his direction. And here's what she never anticipated. You stopped needing her. And that's when attraction takes on a new form. Because true indifference doesn't grow from anger, it grows from wholeness. It's not cold or calculated. It's the natural stillness that rises when a man no longer tries to control what isn't his to hold. You didn't become numb. You became grounded. You didn't pretend not to care. You just finally saw that no amount of effort can keep someone who's already halfway out the door. She expected sadness. She expected ego. She expected noise. But what she got was silence. And in that silence, something inside her shifted. Because when a man no longer makes her the center of his emotional universe, when he turns inward and begins building without her, that's when she starts to feel something she never felt when you were chasing: loss. That's what makes a man unforgettable. Not desperation, not dramatics, but calm. That quiet self-possession that says, I'll be okay either way. Because once a man stops needing a woman to feel complete, he becomes the kind of man she never imagined losing. Reason number 2. She doesn't define your worth, you do. There comes a moment when a man realizes that no matter how much he gives, how consistent he is, or how deeply he feels, it still won't be enough for someone who doesn't know how to receive it. And in that moment, he has a choice. Either let her rejection rewrite his identity or root himself deeper in what's already true. His worth isn't up for negotiation. You didn't always see it this clearly. Like many men, you once believed that being chosen meant being worthy, that if she stayed, it validated your value. And when she left, that same logic tried to convince you that something must be wrong with you. But you outgrew that lie. Slowly, quietly, through pain, through reflection, through the kind of self-work no one else could see. Because a woman can walk away. She can doubt you. She can misinterpret your silence or call your strength distance. But if the foundation within you is solid, none of that can shake you. You're no longer looking to her reactions to decide how you feel about yourself. That cycle has ended. You stopped explaining yourself, not out of pride, but because your life is no longer a courtroom where her opinion serves as the verdict. You finally understood this. Your value isn't a question she gets to answer. It's a truth you've already accepted. And that's what separates you from most men. When she pulls away, they collapse. They question everything. They chase after the echo of their worth in her attention. But not you. You stayed standing. Not because the pain didn't visit you, but because you didn't let it build a home inside you. Her presence doesn't increase your value. Her absence doesn't reduce it. That's not detachment. That's maturity. That's what it means to know who you are, without needing someone else to see it first. And when a man lives that way, it changes everything, because he no longer acts from a place of proving. He moves from a place of knowing. And that shift, the shift from needing to be chosen to choosing himself, doesn't just rebuild his life. It changes how others see him, especially the one who walked away thinking he'd fall. Reason number 3. She doesn't define your worth, no longer exists. There comes a moment when a man realizes that no matter how much he gives, how she misses the version she walked away from, deeply he feels. The man who over-explained, it still won't be enough for someone who doesn't know how to receive it, slipping through his fingers. And in that moment, he has a choice. The man who tried to make either let her reject by rewrite his identity, trying harder, or root himself deeper in what's already true. That's the man she remembers. Isn't up for negotiation. She made peace with. You didn't always see it this clearly, but something happened in the silence. You once believed that being frozen in time, being waiting, aching, that if she stayed, you were already validated your value, not to win her back, and when she left, not to prove anything. That same logic, but because you couldn't remain the man who was willing to break himself with you, just to keep someone who had already let go. Slowly, you did something most men never do. Through pain, you faced yourself. Through reflection, you looked at the kind of self-work no one else could see, the lack of direction, because a woman, and instead of resenting it, you buried it. She can doubt you quietly. She can misinterpret your silence or call your strength distant, not because he failed, but if the foundation was no longer solid to carry who you were becoming, shake you. You evolved. You're no longer looking to someone louder to decide how you feel about yourself, but into someone still. That cycle has ended. Focused. You stopped explaining who no longer needs to be seen, not out in order to feel real, but because your life is no longer a courtroom where her opinion she doesn't recognize you. She searches for familiar patterns. Your way you used to text late at night, she gets to answer. The way you always responded, you've already accepted. The way you used to fold, and that's what separates you from most men. But those reflexes are gone. When she pulls away, you've outgrown them. They question everything. Her memory of you. They chase after the echo of their worth. The man she thought she knew doesn't exist anymore. And in his place stands someone stronger. Not because the pain didn't visit you, unreachable, but because you didn't let it build a home inside you in ways words can't explain. Her presence doesn't increase your value. Because it's not just that you've changed. Her absence doesn't reduce it. You've changed in a direction she never expected. That's maturity. You're no longer reacting to the past. That's what it means to know who you are. You're building a future without needing someone else to see it first. For the first time. And when a man lives that way, he changes everything easily. Because he no longer acts from a place of attention. He is gone from a place of knowing. And the man standing in his place doesn't need from needing to be chosen to choosing himself doesn't just rebuild his life. It changes how others see him, especially the one who walked away thinking he'd fall. Reason number 4. You didn't react. You rose. When a woman pulls away, when her warmth turns cold and her words grow vague, most men slip into one of two extremes. Either they chase harder, desperate to fix the shift, or they lash out, fueled by confusion and pride. But neither path leads to peace. Both are still reactions, still tethered to her energy, still ruled by her movements. You didn't choose either. You didn't chase. You didn't retaliate. You didn't take the bait. Because deep down, you understood something most never learn. When your peace is real, it doesn't need to be defended. It simply holds. You felt the sting of her distance, yes. You noticed the shift, but you didn't flinch. Not because you didn't care, but because you cared more about staying grounded than staying in a game built on emotional volatility. In a world addicted to chaos, your calm became the disruption. You didn't fight for her attention. You didn't try to decode every mixed signal. You didn't adjust your energy to match her silence or soften your strength to make her feel safe. You just stood still, rooted, composed, present. You held your line not to play a strategy, but because you'd finally outgrown the tug-of-war between insecurity and ego. And that's when something began to shift. Not just in you, but in her. She couldn't shake you. She couldn't throw you off. She couldn't use distance as leverage because you didn't respond with desperation. She couldn't use silence as punishment because you didn't treat it as loss. While she stirred the storm, you became the sky above it. You didn't just stop playing her emotional game, you made the game irrelevant. And that quiet power, it unsettled her because she expected a reaction. She expected the old version of you to come crawling back, to prove himself, to beg for resolution. Instead, you gave her stillness. You became the mirror, not to reflect her pain, but to expose the drama she was trying to keep alive. She expected you to fall. You rose instead. And in that rise, in that calm, unapologetic strength, you became unforgettable. Reason number 5. She's no longer the center, you are. There was a time when every decision you made, every message you sent, every moment you doubted yourself, somehow circled back to her. Her mood, her attention, her approval. You didn't realize it then, but your world had quietly begun to orbit hers. And when she pulled away, it felt like your axis collapsed. But what looked like a loss was actually the beginning of something far more important. A return. Not a return to her, but to you. You started to remember the man you were before she entered the picture. The man who didn't wait for permission to dream. The man who moved through the world with his own rhythm, not someone else's reaction. The man who didn't ask, "Will this impress her?" but instead asked, "Does this fulfill me?" And slowly, almost silently, you began rebuilding your world, not around her absence, but around your presence. You stopped checking her updates, not out of bitterness, but because you had updates of your own. You no longer needed to be seen by her. You started seeing yourself again. Your days became filled, not with waiting but with movement, with small wins, quiet confidence, deeper friendships and unshakable routines. You woke up with direction. You went to bed with peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time in a long time, you were finally living for something real. You're too busy living a life worth watching, and this time she's not the one writing the script. She's not the center anymore. She's no longer the author. And that's what hits her hardest, because she thought she'd always have a place in your story. But now, as your life expands without her, as you glow in your own light, she realizes something she never anticipated. She's no longer the main character. She's just a chapter, a beautiful, painful, necessary chapter, but one you've already finished. And now, you're not just turning the page, you're writing a better story, one where your name finally comes first. Reason number 6. Silence wasn't distance, it was power. Most women expect a certain pattern after a breakup. A wave of emotion, a flurry of late-night messages, a half-hearted attempt to stay friends, laced with hope and confusion. They expect noise, because that's what they're used to. And for a while, that's what you might have given in the past. But not this time. This time, you chose something different. You chose silence. You didn't go silent to punish her. You didn't disappear to make her miss you. You withdrew because you had nothing left to explain. And more importantly, because you realized your presence no longer needed to fight to be seen. This wasn't avoidance. It was alignment. You weren't running from the pain. You were refusing to bleed for someone who no longer wanted to be part of your healing. You didn't post cryptic quotes. You didn't stalk her stories. You didn't wait for the perfect moment to resurface in her world. You simply vanished, not with anger, not with resentment, but with quiet conviction. Not because you wanted her to chase you, but because you stopped chasing anything that asked you to lose yourself in return. She had an illusion of control, thinking you'd always linger, always reach out, always orbit her world no matter how far she drifted. But silence breaks that illusion. It reminds her that you were never hers to keep. You were choosing to stay. And once you stopped choosing, she felt it. That's when silence stops being quiet. It becomes unforgettable. Because now the questions begin. Not the ones she voices, but the ones she carries in the back of her mind when she sees you missing from her notifications. Did he forget me? Has someone else replaced me? Or worse, did I never really matter to him at all? And that's the power of your silence. It doesn't scream, it echoes. It doesn't demand her attention. It forces her to sit in her own, because nothing speaks louder than the absence of a man she thought would never walk away. And nothing is harder to ignore than the quiet she never prepared for. Reason number 7. You left with dignity, not drama. You didn't turn the ending into a performance. You didn't beg her to reconsider, didn't fall apart in her silence, didn't chase after a version of love that already walked away. There were no emotional outbursts, no grand speeches to convince her of your worth. You simply stood up, steadied yourself, and left with calm, with clarity, and without theatrics. That choice didn't come from pride. It came from presence. You realized that no amount of effort can hold together something that's already unraveled. You understood that walking away wasn't surrender, it was self-respect. And in a world where most men either explode or cling when they're rejected, your composure became the most disarming response of all. You didn't ghost her to get even. You didn't disappear to create curiosity. You just chose to end the story with the same grace you wished it had been written in. No bitterness, no blame. You stepped back, not because you were weak, but because you were finally strong enough to stop trying to control what was never yours to fix. You don't chase closure. You don't try to squeeze meaning out of someone who's already stopped listening. You simply walk away, with clarity, with grace, and without noise. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And it's exactly why she won't forget it. She'll remember the way you exited, how clean it felt, how sudden, not because it was loud, but because it was absolute. She expected tension. She expected confusion, maybe even one last plea. But what she got was the quiet dignity of a man who knew who he was, even when the relationship fell apart. You didn't walk away to make her regret losing you. You walked away because chasing someone who doesn't value your peace is the fastest way to lose yourself. And in the end, that's what truly stayed with her. Not what you said, but what you didn't. Not the effort you made to bring her back, but the effort you made to return to yourself. Reason number 8. You stopped resisting what is. There's a particular kind of suffering that doesn't come from what someone did to you. but from what you refused to accept. And for a while, that was your story. It wasn't her walking away that kept you stuck. It was your quiet, desperate need for the ending to look different. You kept waiting for clarity. You replayed old conversations, looking for what you missed. You kept the door cracked, just in case she changed her mind. But over time, you began to realize it wasn't the rejection that hurt anymore. It was your resistance to it. The belief that she owed you answers, closure, or an eventual return had become heavier than the loss itself. You weren't carrying her absence. You were carrying the illusion that something still needed to be fixed. And when that illusion broke, something surprising happened. You didn't fall apart. You felt lighter. Because once you let go of the silent expectation that she would come back, once you released the story in your head where she returned, apologized, and saw your worth, you finally made room to see it yourself. The healing didn't start because she said something new. It began because you stopped waiting for her to. You weren't carrying her rejection. You were carrying your resistance to what is. And once you dropped that, peace followed. Now, she might come back. Or she might not. But that no longer determines your direction. That no longer defines your worth. Her return isn't your redemption. Her silence isn't your sentence. You've stepped into something deeper than relief. You've stepped into freedom, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped trying to control. You're not waiting, you're not hoping, you're just living. And ironically, that's when they start to feel the shift. That's when the gravity changes. Because real freedom isn't loud or performative. It's quiet, it's strong, and it pulls everything that was once running away back into orbit, not through pressure, but through presence. Reason number 9, you moved on and left her behind. There was no big announcement, no final post to prove you were doing fine, no dramatic moment to declare your healing. You just moved, quietly, steadily, with purpose. You didn't have to prove that you were over her. You just started living like a man who was finally over needing to prove anything at all. You stopped performing strength. You started embodying it. And that shift doesn't make noise, but it leaves a mark. Because when a man rises without needing to be seen, the world sees him anyway. Not because he's trying to impress, but because he's too focused on becoming. You weren't chasing a comeback. You were building a new chapter. You started showing up in places she didn't expect to see your name, in conversations she wasn't part of, in rooms she no longer had access to. And while you weren't moving to escape her, your growth naturally created distance, not just physical, but emotional, spiritual, psychological. She doesn't know where you're going now, but she can feel it's somewhere she no longer belongs. The version of you she left behind no longer exists. And the man you've become, he doesn't need her to look back. He's facing forward, eyes on the horizon, hands building a life no longer shaped around her absence. You didn't rise out of revenge, you rose out of responsibility, and that's what she never saw coming. Your progress becomes louder than your pain. Not in what you say, but in how you carry yourself. In how you laugh again, without bitterness. In how you love your life, without needing her to witness it. That's what makes you unforgettable. Not the man who begged for her return, but the one who walked away and never stopped walking. The one who didn't look back, not because he hated her, but because he finally remembered where he was going. And that man, the man who rose in silence, is the one she can't unsee. Reason number 10, you chose yourself, and that changed everything. You weren't trying to make a statement. You weren't playing a long game to trigger her return. You didn't disappear so she'd come looking. You walked away so you could finally look inward. And what you found there wasn't bitterness. It wasn't resentment. It was the quiet, sobering realization that you had abandoned yourself long before she ever did. At some point, you stopped asking what went wrong with her and started asking what you'd ignored in yourself. The truth wasn't that she broke you, it's that you'd been bending for too long, shrinking, compromising, second-guessing the very core of who you were just to stay in something that was already fading. The rejection wasn't the wound, it was the mirror. And when you saw that clearly, you stopped fighting to be understood by her and started fighting to be honest with yourself. That's when everything began to shift. You stopped trying to become the man she might have wanted and started becoming the man you could finally respect. A man with direction, with standards, with stillness that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. So now when she looks back, she barely recognizes you, not because you changed into someone else, but because you stopped betraying who you were always meant to be. The quiet, the strength, the sense of peace that doesn't beg for validation. That's what she feels now, not your absence, but your evolution. Rejection didn't break you. It revealed where you had been betraying yourself. You're not waiting to be chosen anymore. You've already made the choice that matters most. You choose yourself, fully, without apology, without performance. And when a man does that, not as a tactic, but as a truth, he becomes powerful in a way no woman can ever ignore. That's when they return. Not because you tried to pull them back, but because they feel they've lost something they never fully understood. But by the time she does, everything has changed, because the man she left behind isn't here anymore, and the man you've become doesn't look backward to feel whole. Now the question is no longer, will she come back? It's, does the man I am today even want what the old me used to beg for? And if the answer is no, that's when you know. You didn't just win her attention, you earned your freedom. Let me speak to the men who are still in it, the ones staring at their phones, replaying conversations, wondering if silence means it's really over. Here's the truth. She didn't come back because you begged. She came back because you stopped needing to. Everything we've walked through, letting go without resentment, reclaiming your worth, staying composed in chaos, rising instead of reacting, this is what it means to choose yourself. You didn't just lose her, you found you. The hardest part of rejection isn't her absence. It's the temptation to abandon yourself just to win someone who's already gone. But when you stop fighting the truth and start standing in it, you become the man she never expected to lose, and the man you were always meant to be. This isn't about tactics. It's about transformation. Because when a man no longer asks to be chosen and instead becomes someone he can respect, that's when she feels the loss. And by the time she does, you've already moved forward, not for revenge, but for peace. And that, more than anything, is why she comes back. If today's message resonated with you, if it stirred that quiet strength within you, like the video and subscribe to Stoic Station. This is where real men come to grow. No noise, no performance, just truth, presence, and the path back to yourself. Your journey matters, and it continues here.